Picture this. You're one of the most famous voices in all of sports. For decades, you've been the guy everyone knows. The man who stood up for Muhammad Ali when the whole world turned against him. The broadcaster who told America that John Lennon was dead. The voice that made Monday Night Football must-see television. You've survived death threats, angry fans, and network battles. Nothing can touch you. Then, one Monday night in September, you say 6 simple words during a football game. 6 words that destroy everything you've built. 6 words that end a legendary career instantly and change your life forever. What could Howard Cosell have possibly said that was so shocking, so terrible, that it wiped out decades of success in a single moment? The answer might surprise you. And when you learn who actually defended him afterward, it'll blow your mind. This is the incredible true story of how one sentence brought down the most powerful man in sports broadcasting. But to understand what happened that night, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to when Howard Cosell was just a kid named Howard Cohen, trying to make it in a world that didn't always welcome people like him. Howard William Cohen was born on March 25, 1918, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. His parents were Jewish immigrants who had escaped Eastern Europe to find a better life in America. His father worked as an accountant, and his mother stayed home to raise Howard. They believed that education was the only way to escape poverty and build a better future. The family didn't stay in North Carolina for long. Before little Howard turned 3 years old, they packed up everything and moved to Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn in the 1920s was a tough place. It was crowded, noisy, and filled with immigrant families all trying to build new lives from nothing. That's where Howard learned to fight with words instead of fists. While other kids settled arguments with their hands, Howard used his sharp tongue and quick mind. He was always reading books and quoting them on the playground. He never backed down from an argument, and he was always ready with a clever comeback. Even as a young boy, you could see the confidence and ego that would later make him famous. As Howard got older, he started to understand how important it was to stand out. When he went to law school at New York University in the late 1930s, he made a decision that would change everything. He changed his last name from Cohen to Cosell. He said it came from his grandfather's original Polish name before it got changed at Ellis Island when the family came to America. But the name change wasn't just about family history. Howard knew that having a Jewish name could hurt his chances in certain careers. He didn't want to blend into the background. He wanted people to remember him, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. Even in high school, Howard showed signs of the broadcaster he would become. He was the sports editor of a school newspaper at Alexander Hamilton High School in Brooklyn. But he didn't write nice, boring articles like other student reporters. He wrote bold opinions that made people angry. He called out bad coaching and criticized poor performances. Some students hated him for it. Some teachers admired him. But nobody could ignore him. By the time he was 21, Howard had earned 2 college degrees from NYU, one in English literature and one in law. That was pretty rare back then. He was smart, driven, and moving fast through life. But a stable job wasn't enough for him. He wanted more than just success. He wanted influence. He wanted fame. He wanted his voice to matter. When World War II broke out, Howard joined the U.S. Army. He served as a major in the Transportation Corps from 1942 to 1945 at the New York port. It was a huge responsibility. He helped organize the movement of troops and supplies across the Atlantic Ocean. One mistake could delay entire military missions and put lives at risk. But Howard thrived under that kind of pressure. He became one of the youngest officers in that role, and he proved he could handle power and responsibility. While he was stationed in New York, Howard met a woman named Mary Edith Abrams. Everyone called her Emmy. She was a WAC sergeant in the Army. There was just one problem. It was against military rules for officers to date enlisted soldiers. But Howard didn't care about rules. He went straight to a general and asked for permission to date her. That took serious guts, but the general said yes. Emmy's family wasn't thrilled about their relationship. They were conservative Presbyterians, and Howard was Jewish. But Howard never let other people's opinions stop him from doing what he wanted. They got married in 1944 in a Brooklyn judge's office, while Howard was still in the Army. Their marriage would last 46 years, until Emmy died in 1990. After the war ended, Howard returned to New York and opened his own law practice in Manhattan. He was good at it too. He built up a client list that included some famous people, like baseball legend Willie Mays. He was making around $25,000 to $30,000 a year, which was really good money back then. But even though he was successful, Howard felt trapped. He didn't enjoy being a lawyer. He would pace around his office pretending to give speeches to juries or pretending to announce fake sports games. His friends thought it was weird, but Howard felt like he had to do it. He once told a reporter that he lacked sufficient mediocrity to survive in the business. He needed something bigger, something louder, something more public. And sports radio was about to give him exactly what he was looking for. In 1953, Howard got his first real break in broadcasting. A man named Hal Neal from ABC Radio invited him to host a small show on WBC in New York. The concept was simple. Little league kids would interview Major League Baseball players. Howard agreed to do it, even though he wouldn't get paid a single penny. He kept working as a lawyer during the day and did the radio show on the side. For almost 3 years, Howard didn't earn any money from broadcasting. But he didn't care about the money. He saw it as his way into the business. The show was light and fun, but Howard was learning something much more important. During one show, Yankees outfielder Hank Bauer casually criticized his manager Casey Stengel on the air. That small comment became a big headline in the newspapers. Howard realized something powerful that day. If you just let people talk freely, they often reveal the truth. They say things they probably shouldn't say. And those moments make the best stories. That lesson would stick with him for the rest of his career. The president of ABC, Robert Kintner, later challenged Howard to find a sponsor for a new sports segment. Howard took that challenge head-on. He found the sponsor and launched a show called Speaking of Sports. That show would end up running for decades and would make Howard one of the most recognizable voices in sports. By 1956, Howard was done playing it safe. He left his law practice behind and became a full-time sports reporter for ABC Radio. Most sports broadcasters back then were pretty boring. They asked easy questions and avoided anything controversial or personal. But Howard came in swinging from day one. In one early interview, he bluntly asked a basketball player if his teammates avoided passing him the ball because he took too many shots. People weren't used to hearing questions like that on sports radio. Howard kept pushing boundaries. He listened carefully to every answer and always followed up if he thought someone was hiding something. Some people hated his aggressive style. Others respected it. Athletes like Tommy Smith, who gave the Black Power salute at the 1968 Olympics, chose Howard for interviews because they trusted him. They knew he would let them speak freely and treat their opinions seriously. That trust was incredibly important and would define Howard's entire career. Over time, Howard became known for one thing above all else. He told the truth. He wasn't there to be a cheerleader for teams or athletes. He wasn't there to make everyone feel good. He called out bad behavior when he saw it. He criticized poor performances. He talked about race, politics, and war, even when people told him to stick to sports. Some fans loved him for it. Others absolutely hated him. But nobody ignored him. He was called both the most hated man in sports and the conscience of American sports broadcasting. His voice, with its sharp rhythm and clear tone, became impossible to forget. His famous phrase, "This is Howard Cosell, telling it like it is," stuck in people's minds and became part of American culture. Then came his relationship with Muhammad Ali, which would change both of their lives forever. In 1964, the world knew the boxer as Cassius Clay. But when he stepped up and announced that his new name was Muhammad Ali, most people refused to accept it. Newspapers kept calling him Clay. TV anchors avoided saying Ali. The backlash was instant and brutal. But there was one man who stood up and said the name loud and clear on national television, Howard Cosell. He didn't care that millions of people were angry. He didn't care that hate mail poured into his office. He believed Ali had the right to be called whatever name he chose. And Howard wasn't going to back down. Howard understood what it meant to be an outsider. He was a Jewish kid from Brooklyn who had been bullied for his background. He understood prejudice and discrimination. That's why he stood with Ali, even when it put his own career at risk. He said, "It's his name, and I'll call him what he wishes to be called." That one decision changed everything. It wasn't just about boxing. It was about identity, respect, and having the courage to do what's right. From that moment on, Ollie and Howard were bonded by something much deeper than sports. Then came 1967, and everything got much more complicated. The Vietnam War was raging, and young men were being drafted by the thousands. Muhammad Ali shocked the world by saying no. He refused to fight in a war he didn't believe in. He said it went against his religious faith, and he wouldn't kill people who had never done anything to harm him. The punishment was swift and severe. Ali lost his boxing license. He was banned from fighting. They stripped him of his heavyweight title. Most of the media turned against him completely. They called him a coward and a traitor. But Howard didn't join the pylon. Instead, Howard went on the air and called the government's actions inhuman and illegal. He said it was wrong to punish Ali for his beliefs. Sponsors threatened to pull their advertisements from Howard's shows. Network executives warned him to stay quiet and stick to sports. But Howard didn't flinch. He said what nobody else in mainstream media would say. Howard saw the double standard clearly. Rich white men who avoided the draft often went unpunished. But Ali, young, black, and outspoken, was being made an example of. Howard called it out loud and clear on national television. The hate mail returned stronger than ever, but it only made the friendship between Howard and Ali stronger. They weren't just broadcaster and boxer anymore. They were two men standing together against a storm of criticism and hatred. And then there was the magic they created on television together. For nearly 20 years, Ali and Howard lit up TV screens across America. Their interviews felt like verbal boxing matches. Ali would make fun of Howard's hairpiece, laugh at his big vocabulary words, and jokingly promise to knock him out just for fun. Howard would roll his eyes, hit back with sarcasm, and challenge Ali on everything. They argued, they laughed, they teased each other, and they kept audiences glued to their TV sets every single time. It was more than just entertainment. It was a real conversation between two equals. It was brutally honest, but always respectful underneath the jokes. One time, Ali shouted, "Every time you open your mouth, you should be arrested for air pollution." Howard shot back, "You'd still be living in poverty if I hadn't made you famous." It was bold, it was funny, it was raw. But beneath all the jokes, they genuinely admired and trusted each other. The cameras couldn't fake that kind of authentic friendship. When Ali was banned from boxing and almost forgotten by the sports world, Howard didn't forget about him. While others turned their backs on the former champion, Howard kept opening his studio doors. He kept inviting Ali on his shows. They talked about Ali's faith, his decision to avoid the war, his dreams, and his fears. In one memorable interview at the Houston Astrodome, you could see the sweat on Ali's face after a hard training session. But Howard didn't just ask about the upcoming fight. He asked about the man behind the gloves, and people really listened. Ali wasn't seen as a villain anymore. He was a human being with complex thoughts and feelings. And Howard helped make that transformation happen. Then came one of the most famous moments in sports broadcasting history. It was 1973, and Joe Frazier was in the ring with George Foreman. Millions of people were watching on television. Round after round, Frazier kept hitting the canvas hard. And Howard's voice rang through TV sets across the world with 3 simple words, shouted 3 times. "Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!" It was raw emotion. It was pure disbelief. And it became the most famous boxing call in television history. People still quote those words today. They still laugh about it and feel the excitement of that moment. That night, Howard didn't just describe what happened in the ring. He captured a moment in time that proved sports wasn't just about who won or lost. It was about the emotions we feel while watching. And nobody made us feel those emotions like Howard did. Ali would later say that Howard gave him a voice when nobody else would listen. Howard once said that Ali helped him become more than just a sports broadcaster. He became part of the story itself. Together, they pushed America to think about race, religion, war, and identity. They did it not with anger, but with words, dignity, and incredible courage. In 1970, ABC executive Roone Arledge made a decision that would change American television forever. He hired Howard Cosell to be part of the brand new Monday Night Football broadcast team. This was a complete gamble. Howard wasn't a former football player. He wasn't even a traditional football announcer. He was loud, opinionated, and had a voice that demanded attention whether you liked it or not. Arledge didn't want boring, safe commentary. He wanted sparks to fly, and that's exactly what Howard brought to the table. The NFL wasn't happy about this choice. For years, the league had insisted on approving who sat in broadcast booths during their games. Arledge said absolutely not. He stood firm and refused to let the league control his broadcast team. And his gamble paid off big time. TV ratings jumped 50% in that first season. Viewers were hooked not just on the football games themselves, but on the entire show surrounding the game. The following year, in 1971, Arledge made another bold move. He replaced the respected announcer Keith Jackson with Frank Gifford. Gifford had never done play-by-play commentary before, but he was a former football star with a calm, likable personality. Arledge wasn't looking for the most experienced broadcasters. He was building a team with different personalities that would create sparks. Howard brought the drama and controversy. Don Meredith added humor and laid-back charm. And Gifford would balance them both out with his steady presence. The combination worked perfectly. TV ratings soared even higher. ABC was charging $65,000 for a single advertisement minute during Monday Night Football games. That was a massive amount of money for the time. This broadcasting trio didn't just change how football was covered on television, they completely redefined what live sports could be. They weren't just announcers sitting quietly in a booth. They were part of the entertainment. What kept people watching wasn't always the games themselves. It was the verbal sparks flying between Howard and his co-hosts, especially Don Meredith. Howard's sharp, aggressive tone and Meredith's relaxed Texas humor created a tension that was impossible to ignore. They argued on the air constantly. They teased each other mercilessly. Once in 1974, they were both suspected of being a little drunk during a live broadcast. The TV audience didn't care. They loved every minute of it. People started picking sides. You were either Team Cosell or Team Meredith. Bars and living rooms across America buzzed with debates about which broadcaster was better. And Arledge encouraged all of it because he knew that conflict made for great television. The show didn't feel scripted or fake. It felt real and spontaneous, and that made it absolutely unforgettable. Howard also had a voice that could turn simple moments into major events. One phrase in particular became iconic across America: he could go all the way. Howard would say it slowly and dramatically, building suspense even during routine plays. He didn't just describe what was happening on the field. He turned every play into a story with real drama. Sometimes, he would tell personal details about a player's life before delivering that famous line. It wasn't just a touchdown, it was a triumph over adversity. The phrase became so popular that other broadcasters started copying it. Chris Berman made it part of his act on ESPN years later. Today, you can still hear that phrase in highlight reels and comedy sketches. It wasn't just a catchphrase. It was a symbol of how Howard brought pure entertainment into the broadcast booth. But Howard wasn't loved by everyone in the sports world. His public fights with newspaper columnist Dick Young became the stuff of legend. Young called him names in print like Howie the Fraud, and even tried to sabotage Howard's interviews by shouting obscenities during tapings. It was personal, it was loud, and it was symbolic of a bigger change happening in sports media. Young represented the old world of newspaper sports writing. Howard was the face of the new world of television sports. They weren't just fighting each other personally, they were fighting for the future of how sports would be covered. Howard fired back just as hard, calling Young a right-wing cultural illiterate. Their war of words played out in newspaper columns, on TV, and even in team locker rooms. Howard also had conflicts with other broadcasters. One of them was Chris Economaki, a legend in motorsports coverage. Economaki once said that Howard had the biggest ego he'd ever encountered in broadcasting. Their conflict wasn't just about ratings or professional jealousy, it was deeply personal. Howard held grudges like nobody else. After Economaki made a small mistake during one interview, Howard brought it up again and again for years. Even something as simple as an introduction at a Christmas party could set Howard off if he felt disrespected. He didn't forget slights, no matter how minor they seemed to other people. Working with Howard could be absolutely exhausting, but his presence always drew massive attention. That mix of brilliance and conflict became a huge part of his mystique and legend. Another famous critic was Jimmy Cannon, a well-known sports columnist. He took aim at Howard in newspaper articles, mocking his hairpiece and his name change from Cohen to Cosell. Cannon didn't just attack Howard's broadcasting style, he questioned the man himself. He called Howard fake and said he was nothing but performance and ego. He even joked that if Howard were a sport, he would be roller derby. The insults hurt, but they also made Howard even more famous. Howard's distinctive look and voice made him an easy target for parody and jokes. But that didn't stop him from speaking his mind. In fact, all the criticism seemed to fuel his legend. He was controversial, he was combative, and he didn't apologize for any of it. Howard also openly criticized the trend of hiring former athletes as sports broadcasters. He called it jockocracy and believed the job should go to people who had actually trained for broadcasting, not just people who happened to play professional sports. That put him at odds with his own co-hosts like Gifford and Meredith, both former players. Howard didn't hide his opinion about this. He said ex-players often lacked real insight and depth in their commentary. It was a risky stance to take because TV viewers generally liked seeing familiar faces from their favorite teams. But Howard stuck to his beliefs. He thought sports commentary should be thoughtful and well-informed, not just casual conversation between buddies. His criticism sparked real debates about what sports broadcasting should actually be. He didn't win many friends in the industry with that attitude, but he definitely made people think about the issue. Despite his loud, over-the-top personality on television, Howard was actually a quiet, gentle man behind the scenes. The most important thing in his life wasn't fame or controversy, it was his wife, Emmy. Her real name was Mary Edith Abrams, and they had been married since 1944. Howard once told a reporter, "I wouldn't even cross the Triborough Bridge without Emmy." He wasn't exaggerating. Emmy followed him everywhere, to games, events, interviews, and business meetings. People in the television industry knew how close they were and how much Howard depended on her. Even his daughters said he couldn't function properly without Emmy by his side. She gave him balance and kept him grounded when his ego got out of control. After she died in 1990, everything changed for Howard. His health got worse quickly. His spirit seemed to fade away. Within just 1 year of her death, he had surgery to remove a tumor. 2 years later, he left broadcasting for good. People who only knew the tough, argumentative version of Howard on TV were shocked by how broken he became without Emmy. That side of him, the quiet love and total dependence on his wife, had always been hidden behind all the noise and controversy of his public persona. At home, Howard was nothing like the man people saw on camera. The shouting, the arguments, the fast-talking, all of that was just part of his job. In private, he was calm and gentle. He had 2 daughters, Jill and Hillary, and he loved reading them poetry from famous writers like Keats and Shelley. During family walks, he would recite beautiful lines of poetry softly. He played card games with neighbors and rarely raised his voice at home. Emmy was the only person who could calm Howard down when he got too worked up about something. Hillary once said that her father couldn't live without her mother, and it showed in everything he did. He was always much softer and kinder around his grandchildren, too. At home, he was never the mouth that roared that people saw on television. Instead, he was thoughtful, humble, and completely devoted to his family. That version of Howard was just as real as his TV personality, but most people never got to see it. While Howard was building his broadcasting career, he also started developing a serious drinking problem. Monday Night Football brought him incredible fame, but it also brought tremendous stress. Sometimes that stress led to too much vodka before going on the air. On November 23, 1970, during a freezing cold game in Philadelphia, Howard drank several martinis before the live broadcast began. During the show, he slurred his words badly and mispronounced Philadelphia as Philadelphia. Then, in front of millions of viewers, he threw up right on Don Meredith's cowboy boots. He had to leave the broadcast booth immediately. TV viewers were absolutely shocked, but it wasn't the only time something like that happened. People who worked at ABC said Howard often drank before, during, and after shows. His drinking became a serious problem that everyone knew about, but nobody wanted to address directly. In 1984, during the baseball playoffs, his broadcasting partner, Al Michaels, finally had enough. He told Howard to his face, "You're ruining the broadcast." The network executives didn't know what to do. TV ratings were still high, but Howard's unpredictable behavior was becoming impossible to manage. His drinking problem became part of his legacy, something fans remember just as clearly as his famous voice and controversial opinions. Under all that confidence and bravado, Howard was actually deeply insecure. He was constantly afraid that people didn't really like him. That fear drove many of his actions throughout his career. He fought with co-hosts, challenged sports officials, and argued with network executives. But it wasn't always about finding the truth or doing what was right. Sometimes it was just about proving that he belonged and deserved respect. Howard once said that only Frank Sinatra got more negative press coverage than he did. He constantly asked TV producers if other people in the industry were turning against him. He worried about being replaced or forgotten. All those bold opinions and sharp words were often just a shield to protect his feelings. People thought Howard was arrogant and full of himself. But many of his biggest outbursts actually came from fear and insecurity, not pride. He needed to be seen, he needed to be respected, and when he wasn't, it hurt him deeply. One of Howard's most unforgettable moments as a broadcaster came on December 8, 1980. During the final minutes of a Monday Night Football game between the Miami Dolphins and New England Patriots, he received word that John Lennon had been shot and killed outside his apartment building in New York City. Howard paused for a moment. He didn't want to interrupt a football game with that kind of terrible news. His co-host Frank Gifford told him that he had to do it. It was too important to wait. So Howard went live on national television and told millions of viewers, "This is just a football game. No more, no less." An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News in New York City. John Lennon, outside of his apartment building on the west side of New York City, the most famous, perhaps of all of the Beatles, shot twice in the back, rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival. The broadcast booth went completely quiet after that. People sat frozen in their living rooms across America. Nobody was expecting to hear that kind of devastating news during a football game. But it was a moment that showed just how powerful television could be as a medium for sharing important information. Howard wasn't just a sports announcer that night. He was the person who told America that one of its most beloved musical voices was gone forever. And then came the night that changed everything. September 5, 1983. Millions of Americans were sitting in front of their television sets watching Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys and Washington Redskins were playing an exciting game, and the atmosphere was electric. But what people remember most about that night had absolutely nothing to do with touchdowns or final scores. As Washington wide receiver Alvin Garrett broke through the defensive line and ran down the field, Howard made a comment that would destroy his career in an instant. He said, "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" Just 6 words. But those 6 words sparked a national controversy that would never go away. TV viewers were stunned by what they had just heard. The phone lines at ABC immediately lit up with angry complaints. By the next morning, newspapers and talk radio shows were tearing the moment apart piece by piece. Howard, who had been a giant in sports broadcasting for decades, was suddenly at the center of one of the biggest scandals in television history. Reverend Joseph Lowery, who was president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, didn't waste any time reacting. He demanded a public apology from Howard, but he didn't stop there. He sent angry telegrams to ABC executives demanding that they take immediate action against Howard. Lowery used the moment to highlight a much bigger problem. He pointed out the obvious contrast between the large number of black athletes playing on the field and the complete absence of black voices in television broadcast booths. The controversy spread like wildfire across the country. Radio talk shows, newspaper editorials, and TV panel discussions exploded with heated debates about what Howard had said. The demand for Howard's firing grew louder and more intense with each passing hour. It seemed like the entire country was talking about those 6 words. Howard tried desperately to control the damage to his reputation. At first, he claimed that he hadn't said "little monkey" at all. He said he had only commented that Garrett moved like one, and that he meant it as a compliment to the player's speed and agility on the field. ABC executives tried to back him up, saying that Howard wasn't talking about Garrett's race or appearance, just his quickness as a football player. But the television tapes didn't lie. Journalists replayed the footage over and over again and confirmed exactly what viewers had heard with their own ears. Howard had said the exact words that he was now trying to deny. This only made the controversy much worse. Instead of ending the scandal, the denials turned it into an even bigger story about dishonesty and cover-ups. Howard's credibility, which had once been rock solid, began to crumble in front of the entire nation. Under enormous pressure from all sides, Howard finally tried to defend himself more honestly. He said that "little monkey" was a phrase he had used for years to describe quick, agile athletes, and it had never had any racial meaning in his mind. He pointed to earlier broadcasts to prove his point, including a 1972 football game where he had called white player Micah Damel a little monkey. In 1982, he had used the exact same term to describe Glenn Hubbard, who was also white. He even said that he used the phrase affectionately with his own grandchildren at home. Some of Howard's supporters argued that his track record on civil rights issues should matter in this situation. He had always spoken up for racial equality. He had defended Muhammad Ali when almost nobody else would. He had been on the right side of history many times before. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. The context and his past actions were quickly buried under a mountain of public outrage and media coverage that had already decided he was guilty. Then came something that surprised almost everyone. Some of Howard's strongest defenders turned out to be black athletes and civil rights leaders who knew him personally. Jesse Jackson, one of the most respected civil rights leaders in America, publicly supported Howard. Muhammad Ali, his old friend and interview partner, stood firmly by his side during the controversy. Most importantly, Alvin Garrett himself, the player Howard had been describing when he made the comment, said he didn't find the words offensive at all. Garrett explained to reporters, "I liked Howard Cosell. I didn't feel that it was a demeaning statement toward me personally." But public opinion had already been shaped by the media coverage. The story had been framed as a clear case of racial insensitivity, and that version of events had stuck in people's minds. Even with support from the people who mattered most, Howard couldn't escape the storm of criticism that was destroying his reputation. The controversy had taken on a life of its own, and it didn't care about past friendships, good intentions, or the actual facts of the situation. By the end of the 1983 football season, Howard's career at Monday Night Football was over. 13 years after helping to completely reinvent how football was presented on television, he stepped away from the broadcast booth. He called the entire experience emotionally draining and said he couldn't continue. But it wasn't just the scandal that wore him down and convinced him to quit. Howard had grown deeply disappointed with the direction that both professional football and television were heading. His departure marked the end of an era in sports broadcasting. Howard had once been a fearless voice who wasn't afraid to challenge athletes, coaches, and even the sports leagues themselves. He had stood up for what was right even when it was difficult and unpopular. Now, a single sentence had ended it all. Though he continued working on radio until 1992, his presence on television was never the same again. His personal life soon began to fall apart as well. In 1991, at the age of 73, Howard was diagnosed with cancer. Doctors found a tumor in his chest, and he underwent major surgery that June. At the same time, he was trying to cope with the death of his beloved wife, Emmy, who had been his life partner and emotional support for nearly 5 decades. Howard tried to stay active on his radio shows, but it was clear to everyone that he was fading fast. By 1992, he retired from broadcasting completely. He spent his final years battling not only cancer, but also heart disease, Parkinson's disease, and several minor strokes. Interviews with Howard from that time period show a man filled with deep regret and sadness. He felt like he had been pushed out of the industry before he could complete the important work he had started. The same powerful voice that had once shaped how America understood and talked about sports had gone completely quiet. And sadly, most of the world barely noticed. On April 23, 1995, Howard Cosell died in New York City at the age of 77. The cause of death was a heart embolism. News of his death brought very mixed reactions from the public and the media. Some people called him a true legend and a pioneer who had made sports broadcasting smarter, bolder, and more honest. Others remembered only the controversies, the ego, and the scandal that had ended his career. There were glowing obituaries that praised his contributions to television and journalism. There were also sharp critiques that focused on his flaws and mistakes. Some fans genuinely mourned his passing. Others just shrugged and moved on with their lives. His legacy had been forever changed by that one night in 1983, and there was no going back. Even so, the sports world didn't completely forget about Howard's incredible contributions to broadcasting. In 1993, just 2 years before his death, TV Guide magazine named him the greatest sports broadcaster of all time. That same year, he was inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. In 1994, he was added to the Television Hall of Fame, although he was too sick to attend the ceremony. More honors followed after his death. In 1996, he received a posthumous Sports Emmy Award for Lifetime Achievement in Broadcasting. He was also inducted into the American Sportscasters Hall of Fame and later the International Boxing Hall of Fame. These awards were a final recognition that despite the scandal that ended his career, Howard Cosell had changed sports broadcasting forever. So there you have it, the incredible, tragic story of how Howard Cosell went from being the most powerful voice in sports to losing everything because of 6 words spoken during a football game. It's a reminder that in our modern world, a single moment can define an entire lifetime of work and achievement. What do you think about Howard's story? Was he treated fairly, or was he the victim of a media pylon that ignored his decades of fighting for civil rights? Should his past record have mattered more than one controversial comment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story fascinated you as much as it fascinated me, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another incredible story like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.